A thick morning fog blanketed the vast grounds of Fort Benning's Advanced Tactical Training Center, turning the landscape into hazy silhouettes. Soldiers, barely visible through the mist, moved through drills in the distance. Captain Sophia Reyes approached the checkpoint, the heavy gates groaning as they opened. Her duffel bag rested over one shoulder, and her fatigues were impeccably pressed. As she handed her military ID to the guard, he studied it with practiced professionalism, then waved her through. "Building 17, he said, "Commander Blackwell is expecting you." With a sharp nod, Sophia walked forward, her posture flawless, her boots clicking with rhythmic precision on the asphalt. To anyone watching, she might have seemed like any other soldier, but the silver bars on her collar told a different story. Have you ever seen someone underestimated, only to surprise everyone? If you believe in powerful, raw stories like these, subscribe and help us share the quiet legends among us, capable of extraordinary feats. Inside the administrative building, the scene was starkly different. Commander James Blackwell, a seasoned officer with salt and pepper hair, was leaning over a file, his gaze intense. He tossed it onto the conference table where his senior staff had gathered. "West Point, top 2% of her class," he read aloud, his voice laced with skepticism. "3 tours overseas, Silver Star recipient." He paused, looking around at the men seated around him. "But the real question is, gentlemen, is she truly Ranger material?" Major Phillips, the executive officer, flipped open the file to reveal a photo of Captain Sophia Reyes. Even in the bland setting of a military ID photo, her striking features were impossible to ignore, her high cheekbones, piercing brown eyes that radiated confidence, and a serious yet composed expression. Phillips passed the file around with a muttered remark, "The Pentagon's pushing for this integration program. They need someone who looks the part." Blackwell's face tightened. "I've been running this training center for 8 years, he grumbled. "I've seen what it takes to make it here. Politics and PR stunts will get people killed." Major Wilson, younger than most with a scar on his jaw from deployment, chimed in. "Her record is solid, sir," he said, his voice steady. Blackwell shook his head. "This isn't about records. This is about survival." The conversation was interrupted when Lieutenant Hayes knocked on the door. "Commander, Captain Reyes has arrived." "Send her in," Blackwell ordered. He quickly gathered the scattered papers and closed the file, his gesture marking the end of their conversation. Sophia entered with military precision, stopping exactly 6 feet from Blackwell. She saluted sharply. "Captain Sophia Reyes, reporting for duty, sir." The room fell into an uneasy silence as the men took her in. Even in her simple fatigues, her poise was evident. Her dark hair was pulled back into a regulation bun, accentuating her sharp features. But it was her eyes, alert and intelligent, that drew attention. Blackwell broke the silence, his voice thick with underlying judgment. "At ease, Captain," he said after a moment. "Your reputation precedes you." Sophia's face remained neutral, but a flicker of understanding crossed her gaze. She was well aware of the whispers that followed her, too pretty to be taken seriously, a suspect rise through the ranks, the token diversity hire. "Thank you for the opportunity, sir," she said evenly. Blackwell's expression tightened, but he didn't respond. "Lieutenant Hayes will show you to your quarters. Get settled. You'll begin tomorrow." Sophia's voice was steady. "I'm ready to start immediately, sir." Blackwell's tone was final. "Tomorrow will do. Dismissed." She saluted again, pivoted with military precision, and followed Hayes out of the room. As the door closed, the low murmur of conversation resumed, the voices tinged with doubt and derision. Hayes led her to the officers' quarters, a functional building with narrow hallways and identical rooms. "Room 114, he said, stopping in front of a door. "Bathrooms shared, 2 doors down. Mess hall opens at 0500. "Thank you, Lieutenant," Sophia replied as she moved inside. Hayes lingered for a moment, eyeing her curiously. Is it true you took out 3 insurgents during the Kandahar ambush? The one where 2nd Battalion got pinned down? Sophia met his gaze, her expression calm. I was just doing my job, Lieutenant. Hayes nodded, seeming satisfied with her response. Good luck tomorrow, he added, turning away. You're going to need it. He walked off without another word. Sophia entered her room and began unpacking with methodical precision. Every item had its place, uniforms hung neatly, boots positioned just right beneath the bed, toiletries organized in a perfect line. At the bottom of her duffel bag, she found a few personal items, a framed photograph of a much younger Sophia standing next to a Marine in dress blues, his hand resting proudly on her shoulder, a leather case containing her collection of medals, and a well-worn tactical manual, filled with handwritten notes in a precise, angular script. She ran her fingers lightly over the photo before turning her attention back to preparing for the next day. The bugle blared at 0500, signaling the start of the day. By then, Sophia was already awake, having completed an intense pre-dawn workout routine. She entered the mess hall at 0515, and immediately, the chatter in the room stilled, then resumed at a lower volume. Eyes turned toward her, but she remained unfazed, taking her seat at an empty table, her movements efficient. She had become used to this, being the subject of whispers and stares. It had followed her throughout her career, from the academy to deployments, where her looks and gender were seen as distractions. 2 tables away, a group of male officers exchanged quiet words, just loud enough for her to hear. $10 says she breaks a nail during the first exercise, one of them remarked, triggering snickers from the others. Nah, she'll bat her eyelashes at Blackwell and get assigned to admin work, another countered. Sophia ignored them, her face impassive. She had learned long ago to tune out the noise. It didn't affect her anymore, it simply motivated her. Master Sergeant Miller, a grizzled veteran with decades of experience, approached her table. His face was weathered, his tone clipped. Captain Reyes, he said, standing across from her. Heard you set some records at West Point. Sophia met his gaze steadily. Yes, Sergeant. He smirked, his eyes glinting with challenge. The guys have a betting pool on how long you'll last in the crucible. Want in? Sophia didn't flinch. I don't gamble, Sergeant. Smart, he replied, a hint of respect in his voice. Because those are bad odds for you. He tapped her table once before walking away. At 0600, all officers assembled for the morning training exercises. Blackwell stood in front of them, flanked by his senior staff. The fog had lifted, revealing the vast expanse of the training center, obstacle courses, firing ranges, and the infamous crucible. Today we begin integrated team exercises, Blackwell announced. Captain Reyes, you'll join Alpha Squad for the morning rotation. As Sophia approached Alpha Squad, led by Captain Wilson, she sensed the cold reception. The team's response ranged from aloof professionalism to barely concealed resentment. The morning's exercise was a simulated hostage rescue in an urban environment. As the team gathered to plan, Sophia suggested a more tactical entry point, one that would offer less exposure and better cover. We should enter through the service entrance, she said, pointing to the map. Satellite imagery shows it's less exposed, and the adjacent building provides cover. But Wilson, who had already decided on a more direct approach, dismissed her suggestion. We'll breach through the front, he decided. Sophia was relegated to a rear security position. As the exercise unfolded, her predictions proved accurate. The team encountered difficulties, the exposed entry point, a bottlenecked entry, and compromised positions. They completed the mission, but with 3 team members tagged as casualties. Blackwell, watching from above, scribbled notes on his clipboard. He said nothing, but Sophia knew this was only the beginning. Her moment to prove herself would come. The morning exercises proceeded as expected, each drill an unspoken challenge where Captain Sophia Reyes' contributions were consistently ignored or dismissed. Her tactical expertise, honed over years of experience, was never given the weight it deserved. Every suggestion she made was either brushed aside or outright overruled, often without consideration. During the midday break, she overheard Captain Wilson speaking to Lieutenant Parker near the water station, his voice low but filled with disdain. "Blackwell told me to give her a chance, but she's just slowing us down," Wilson murmured. "The last thing we need is someone worrying about breaking a fingernail in the middle of an op." Parker didn't get a chance to reply before Sophia approached, silently filling her water bottle. Wilson, seeing her, quickly straightened up, his expression shifting to one of forced neutrality. "Good effort out there, Captain," he said, his voice lacking any sincerity. Sophia met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "Thank you for the opportunity, sir. I look forward to contributing more effectively to the team." Wilson, visibly uncomfortable, nodded curtly and walked away, Parker trailing behind. The afternoon exercises followed the same pattern, isolating her from the action, undermining her at every turn. In one exercise, her radio malfunctioned mysteriously during a communications drill. In another, her unit was ordered to hold an indefensible position, setting them up for failure from the start. These small, calculated slights came with an air of plausibility, leaving no room for retaliation. By the time evening rolled around and the soldiers were headed to the mess hall, Sophia had built a clear mental map of the social structure at Fort Benning. Commander Blackwell, with his traditional views, reigned at the top, followed closely by Master Sergeant Miller, who enforced those beliefs with a heavy hand. Officers like Wilson were happy to fall in line, while the few fair-minded individuals remained silent, unwilling to disrupt the established order. Once again, Sophia sat alone at dinner, her isolation no longer a surprise but a constant presence. As she ate methodically, her eyes kept scanning the room. When Blackwell entered the hall, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Conversations quieted, and every eye turned toward him. He took his seat at the officers' table, and after a brief silence, his voice carried over the room. "Tomorrow," Blackwell announced, his words firm, "all officers will run the Crucible for evaluation, standard procedure for establishing baseline capabilities." A ripple of reaction spread through the room, the Crucible infamous for its brutal demands. A 2.4-mile gauntlet that tested everything from physical endurance to tactical decision-making, even the most seasoned Rangers had respect for it. Blackwell's gaze fixed on Sophia as he continued. "Captain Reyes, you'll go last, standard procedure for new arrivals." The tone of his words, coupled with the smirks of his colleagues, made the implications clear. The Crucible would be her judgment day, a formality before she was inevitably sent packing. "Yes, sir," she replied evenly, her voice betraying none of the emotions swirling within her. Later that night, after the barracks had quieted, Sophia remained in her quarters, lit only by the soft glow of her desk lamp. The Crucible's map lay before her, its details meticulously studied as she mentally rehearsed her approach to each obstacle. Every movement, every decision, was part of her preparation. As she adjusted the lamp, her sleeve pulled back, revealing a long scar running from her wrist halfway up her forearm. It was one of many scars, remnants from combat zones that no one here had ever bothered to ask about. They saw only her face, judged her based on assumptions, never seeking to understand the depth of her experience. The morning of the Crucible arrived, buzzing with anticipation. Word had spread quickly about the female captain taking on the legendary course, and by 0800, the starting area was packed with off-duty personnel and support staff eager to witness the event. Sophia arrived precisely on time, her face calm as she surveyed the course. From the elevated platform, she could see the entirety of the grueling obstacle, a 20-foot wall climb, a barbed wire crawl, a weapons assembly station, a shooting range, a water trench crossing, and finally the kill house, a multi-room structure requiring split-second decision-making. At the top of the board, her gaze naturally went to the record, 1247, held by Commander Blackwell since 2015. His decade-old time remained unbeaten, a physical testament to his authority. As the morning unfolded, each officer completed the course in reasonable times, generally ranging from 14 to 16 minutes. Captain Wilson crossed the finish line at 13:52, earning claps on the back from his peers, his clothes caked in mud but his expression triumphant. As noon approached, Sophia was the last officer left to run. She stood quietly on the sidelines, observing each competitor's performance, mentally taking note of their strengths and weaknesses. The crowd had grown, the anticipation building for what they expected to be nothing more than entertainment. When Blackwell finally approached her, clipboard in hand, the air shifted. "Captain Reyes," he said, his voice low and final, "you're up." Before she moved to the starting line, he added with a cold edge, "Let's be clear, Captain. This is just a formality. I've already drafted your transfer papers." Sophia locked eyes with him, her expression calm, unwavering. "Understood, sir." As she took her place at the starting line, the jeers from the crowd grew louder. $10 says she breaks a nail and quits halfway through," someone called out. Master Sergeant Miller stood nearby, stopwatch in hand, his face a mask of expectation, waiting for what he believed would be a disaster. Sophia took a deep breath, shrugged off her outer jacket to reveal her standard-issue compression shirt and tactical pants. As she did, the scars across her arms, visible reminders of her combat experience, were exposed. For a moment, the crowd fell silent. They hadn't expected this, hadn't seen the depth of what lay beneath the surface. She secured her hair tightly, checked her gear, and assumed the ready position. Miller raised the starting pistol, and with a sharp crack, the race began. Sophia exploded from the line, her movement so fast and fluid that the crowd stepped back in surprise. She hit the first wall at full speed, employing a diagonal approach that minimized the vertical climb and cleared the obstacle in seconds. As she disappeared into the barbed wire crawl, the crowd's energy began to shift. What they had expected to be a spectacle of failure was quickly turning into a demonstration of precision, a masterclass in military technique. Her training had started young, on a hot summer day in her childhood backyard, crawling beneath a makeshift barbed wire setup her father, a Marine gunnery sergeant, had built. "Flat back, Sophie. Speed matters, but technique keeps you alive," he had said. Now, as she emerged from the official barbed wire section, 30 seconds ahead of Wilson's time, the crowd was left in stunned silence. She continued with flawless precision through the weapons station, her hands a blur as she reassembled the rifle with expert speed. When she took her shooting position, each shot landed perfectly on target, 5 bullseyes, one after another. She barely paused, her movements like clockwork, and in no time, she was running toward the water trench. At the trench, the crowd shifted forward, breathless, watching as Sophia didn't hesitate. She increased her speed and leaped effortlessly over the obstacle, landing with perfect balance on the other side. Commander Blackwell, watching with a growing sense of disbelief, stepped closer to the edge of the course, his clipboard forgotten. She was pushing past the expectations they had set for her, showing them a side of her they had never imagined. The final section of the course, the kill house, tested everything: quick decision-making, flawless execution. As she entered, her movements became a blur of efficiency. The crowd could no longer see her, but the sound of precise shots rang through the air. Each room was cleared with perfect technique, threats identified and neutralized in seconds. Outside, the digital timer ticked upward, the record obliterated as Sophia continued at her own pace, focused on perfection, not speed. She emerged at last, having completed the course not only faster than anyone expected but with an execution that left no room for doubt. Blackwell, once a skeptic, was now watching with a new understanding. The crowd had fallen completely silent, their disbelief palpable. She had not only survived but had redefined what it meant to be a ranger. When Sophia emerged from the kill house, weapon safely pointed downward, there was no celebration, no outward sign of triumph. Her face was set in the same focused expression she always wore after completing a task to standard. The timer stopped at 10:35, an unprecedented time. A complete silence settled over Fort Benning's Advanced Tactical Training Center. All the electronic timers froze, displaying the same time, a time no one thought possible. Covered in mud, breathing evenly despite the intense exertion, Sophia stood tall, waiting at attention, as protocol demanded. Master Sergeant Miller was the first to break the silence. He stepped forward and offered her a water bottle, his eyes reflecting newfound respect. "That was something else, Captain," he said quietly. Through the parting crowd, Commander Blackwell approached slowly, his expression unreadable. He studied Sophia for a moment before speaking. "Where did you learn to move like that, Captain?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine curiosity. Sophia met his gaze and answered simply, "My father's backyard, sir. Then Kandahar. Then Mosul." Her voice was steady, factual, with no boasting. Blackwell nodded slowly, trying to reconcile this with the image he had formed of her. Then, in a rare and powerful gesture, he stood up straight and, without being required by protocol, offered her a formal salute. "Welcome to the Rangers, Captain Reyes." The next morning, the atmosphere at Fort Benning had changed. Word of Sophia's performance had spread quickly, morphing from rumor to legend with each retelling. By breakfast, the stories had already taken on a life of their own. Some claimed she had run the course blindfolded, carried another soldier, or recited the Ranger Creed backward. But Sophia ignored the attention, staying true to her routine. At exactly 0700, she entered the tactical planning room, prepared for whatever challenges awaited. The room had changed. The usual quiet fell when she entered, but this time, the silence wasn't dismissive. It was filled with reassessment, curiosity, and respect. Lieutenant Wilson immediately moved to make room for her at the central table. "Saved you a seat, Captain," he said, his tone now respectful. "We're reviewing the Azerbaijan operation, and we could really use your eyes on this extraction plan." Sophia nodded without a word, taking her seat. She noticed the way everyone looked at her now, curiosity replacing judgment. The map spread across the table detailed a complex extraction mission in mountainous terrain, a situation she knew well from her time in Afghanistan. Commander Blackwell entered shortly after, and his voice carried a different tone. "Morning, officers," he said, the words clipped with purpose. "Captain Reyes will be leading Strike Team Bravo for this operation. Her combat experience in similar terrain makes her uniquely qualified." If anyone was surprised by this announcement, they hit it well. Sophia took the assignment in stride. "Yes, sir," she replied, and her focus shifted to the operation. The target was a high-value intelligence asset, held in a compound nestled in a narrow valley. The extraction would be complicated by limited air support and the presence of nearby civilian settlements. As Blackwell outlined the situation, Sophia offered tactical suggestions, and this time, instead of dismissing her, the team listened. When she suggested an alternative infiltration route that would minimize exposure to enemy observation posts, Wilson was the first to acknowledge its merit. "That could work," he said, studying the map. "It reduces our signature compared to the main approach." Master Sergeant Miller added his support. "Captain Reyes's route keeps us above the thermal inversion layer. We'll be less likely to be spotted by infrared." Blackwell nodded approvingly. "Captain, finalize the infiltration plan with Sergeant Miller. I want options on my desk by 1600. The planning session continued smoothly, with Sophia's insights becoming an integral part of the operations framework. When the meeting ended and the team began preparing for the afternoon rotations, Blackwell stopped Sophia with a simple gesture. "A moment, Captain," he said. When the room had cleared, he looked at her seriously. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I made assumptions based on incomplete information." Sophia's demeanor remained calm. "No apology necessary, sir. I'm used to proving myself." Blackwell's expression softened. "That's the problem. You shouldn't have to keep proving yourself at this point in your career." The words hung in the air for a moment, both of them acknowledging something larger than their individual situation. "Your file mentioned the Silver Star," Blackwell continued, his voice quiet. But it didn't explain the circumstances. Kandahar, 2017. Sophia paused for a brief moment. Yes, sir. A routine translation mission that turned into something far from routine. Blackwell's eyes filled in the gaps. 3 confirmed kills, saving a Marine unit, but the official report credited your father instead. Sophia's voice softened. He insisted. He thought it would be better for my career if I wasn't known as that teenage girl who picked up a rifle. He believed the Marines would take me more seriously without that story attached. Blackwell nodded, thinking for a moment. And yet, even without the recognition, you still pursued this path. I never wanted anything else, sir, she replied firmly. Blackwell nodded, understanding something fundamental about her character. Well, Captain, I think it's time your actual record spoke for itself. Your tactical innovations yesterday are already being incorporated into our training protocols. Sophia acknowledged this with a simple, thank you, sir. Blackwell's tone shifted slightly. Don't thank me yet. Leading Strike Team Bravo means you'll be working with some of the most stubborn Rangers we have. They'll follow you now, but they'll also test you every step of the way. Sophia gave him a small, confident smile. Looking forward to it, sir. The following weeks proved Blackwell's words true. Strike Team Bravo challenged her leadership at every turn, testing her decisions and pushing boundaries. But as time went on, respect for her grew, rooted in her undeniable capability. She implemented her father's unorthodox methods, prioritizing adaptability over rigid procedures, and slowly but surely, Bravo's performance metrics began to rise. 3 weeks into her command, during a night exercise, Sophia led Bravo through dense forest terrain without relying on any navigation aids. Instead, she used natural landmarks and celestial positioning, techniques her father had taught her. When they arrived at the objective 30 minutes ahead of schedule, Sergeant Miller, visibly impressed, turned to Wilson. Never seen anything like it, he said. She reads terrain like it's a map. In the armory later that week, Miller approached her with a custom-modified tactical vest. The team wanted you to have this, he said, placing it before her. The vest was fitted with additional quick-access pouches and embroidered with Reyes and an official Rangers tab. This is normally presented after the first combat deployment, but the team took a vote. They said you've already earned it. Sophia ran her fingers over the embroidered name, a small smile tugging at her lips. Thank you, Sergeant. This means more than you know. Miller nodded, understanding the significance of the gesture. Your father would be proud. Sophia's voice softened. He always was, even when no one else could see it. The day of deployment came, and Strike Team Bravo assembled with military precision. Blackwell addressed the team for the final briefing. The mission parameters remain unchanged: extract the asset, minimize footprint, and avoid civilian casualties. Insertion will be tricky, and exfiltration options are limited. He turned to Sophia. Captain Reyes has command. You follow her orders as you would mine. As the helicopters waited, Blackwell pulled Sophia aside. Trust your instincts, he said quietly. They've proven more reliable than most people's certainties. Sophia nodded confidently. We'll bring everyone home, sir. As the helicopters lifted off into the early morning sky, Lieutenant Wilson looked over at her with a new respect. Ready to make history, Captain? Already did that, Lieutenant, she replied with a smile. Now we just do the job. 6 months later, a new lieutenant, Sarah Chen, approached the gates of Fort Benning. You're in for an interesting experience, Lieutenant, the gate guard said with a smile. They do things differently here now. As Chen passed through the compound, her eyes were drawn to a large digital board. At the top, in red, 1035, S. Reyes, 2025. Impressive, isn't it? A voice behind her said. It was Colonel Phillips. Captain Reyes shattered that record her first day here. Changed everything. Chen nodded. I've heard stories, she admitted. Philip smiled. They're not even close to the whole truth. You'll see for yourself soon enough. As Chen observed Sophia lead a tactical drill, she could see the respect that now followed her. Gone was any need to prove herself. Her presence alone commanded respect. Later, at the officers' club, Blackwell raised his glass. To Captain Reyes, who didn't just meet the standard. Phillips finished the toast. She became it. Sophia's journey is a powerful reminder of how society often underestimates people based on shallow judgments, gender, appearance, and assumptions about their capabilities. It's disheartening to see that, despite her undeniable skills, she had to constantly prove herself, facing doubt from the very people who should have recognized her worth. Her resilience and quiet strength, however, show the true measure of a person, not by fitting into others' expectations, but by exceeding them. It's time we stop letting prejudice define potential and start valuing what really matters: dedication, skill, and integrity. Women like Sophia prove that being the first isn't about recognition, but about breaking barriers for those who come after. Thanks for joining us on this intense ride. If it resonated, hit subscribe, ring the bell, don't miss out. Here's to the silent sacrifices. Together, we're unstoppable. See you next time.